All right. All right, so my name is Ryan Trowbridge, and I am the Tech Art Director at Respawn Entertainment. So a little about myself. I always feel awkward talking about myself. People ask me constantly about, it's like, what got you into tech art, and like, why are you a tech artist, and what is a tech artist? So for me, getting into it, like I drew a lot. I was really into art. I was really into video games, and then I happened to have a friend that was like always doing like weird computer stuff with C++ and whatnot. And so I'd kind of dabble in both. And at one point I was like, I don't know. I don't use C++. I'm an artist. I don't need that. And so I kind of pushed away from it a bit. But initially I got in my career, I joined this company called Pipeworks in Eugene, Oregon. And I was just doing like textures and environment art and things like that. And then I ended up moving into doing like character modeling and things like, and rigging and animation. But as I did it, I got more and more frustrated with my tools. I'd go look at this tool in 3ds Max and go, hey, I could do this better. Like, I want to go copy this pose, and I want to make this, and I want to flip that, and I want to mirror it, and I want to automate it. And I actually ended up going to a GDC talk in the United States, and I saw this other, what I didn't know at the time was a tech artist, and he goes, oh, I wrote this tool, and I did that. And I was like, hey, I could do that. And so I came back, and I was like, I was inspired by that GDC. And I came back to Pipeworks, and I said, I'm going to go start doing that. So I started writing my own tools, and I wrote a bunch of broken stuff. It was just like constantly not working, not doing what I wanted. I was trying to get other artists to use it, and it just was not good. But I just kept kind of pressing through, kind of refining it and getting it to work. And so as it went on, I started moving more and more away from focusing on modeling or animation and rigging, and I focused on building the tools to make the artists' lives easier. And mine, to be honest, I was focusing a lot on just making my own life easier because I was doing so much stuff. At some point, I got where I just wanted to keep pushing things, and I was like trying to do like muscle systems and stuff and things and characters, and we were working on like these Godzilla games for GameCube and PS2. And that eventually led me to looking at another studio, which was Naughty Dog. And I really wanted to find a way to just kind of push the field with tech art and like how we could do more in our field. And so I ended up working on Uncharted 1, 2, 3, 4, and The Last of Us. And it really pushed me into what the tech art field is, and just thinking about, okay, we can, like, tools aren't just for animators. It's like there's tools for designers, there's tools for all kinds of different crafts. And it made me really start thinking way outside the box. I used to look at like things like Golem for Lord of the Rings and be like, man, I was really jealous that they could have so much power to make faces like they did. And I realized, hey, like, this is where tech art can step in and go, how do we distill these complex systems that are not runtime, and how can we make them runtime? And so I really enjoyed just looking at these complex problems and breaking them down and figuring out how we could get that into a game. So after Naughty Dog, I was there for about 9 years. I ended up joining Sony Bend. I worked on this game called Days Gone. That was the first time where I stepped into like a tech art director role, which I didn't really know what they even really meant. But at the time, I started looking at the bigger, broader picture of what tech art is, which I'll continue to go into. And so basically, like, I was looking at the shader pipelines. I was looking at the environment pipelines, how we were optimizing things, how we were building our character rigs, how we were lighting, and it just spanned all these different areas. And so moved on from there, ended up working for a couple years at the Initiative, also ended up working at 343, briefly had a stint as a tools programmer, and then ended up going back to being the tech art director. Then after that, I ended up finally at Respawn. So I've been doing this for a while. It's been about 25 years. So my initial question to the audience is, when you think of tech art, what do you think of? Like, what is tech art? So to me, often people go, oh, tech artists, they're they do rigging. And, well, maybe they do materials, shaders. They help us out with Maya and make Maya do what we want, and Houdini and Substance. Maybe they help you out with Motion Builder, mocap, procedural systems, VFX, optimization, Python, maybe some C++ plugins. That's a lot of different things. And I've literally seen job postings that have every single one of these listed, and they're basically like, can you do everything? Can you help our team? So what you really need is a tech art team, not just tech artists. This is our tech art team at Respawn. We have a pretty sizable team. We also have 5 others that are, actually 7 others that are on here, some in Shanghai, some in Canada. This was an event that we had celebrating the 5th year of Apex. So I wanted to kind of start breaking down, like, what do you think of when you think, like, what the tech art fields are from my perspective. So one of the key ones to me is the pipeline tech artists. So pipeline tech artists are essentially a tools engineer, but they're effectively focused on third-party tools and the creative process. They're focused at the beginning of the pipeline. Most engineers that are game engineers and whatnot, they're focused on getting the game engine, maybe the game tools, but the tech artists are focused on at the beginning of the pipeline. Then you have animation tech artists. So that group fits into things like character building, props, face systems, mocap, animation graphs. They'll often be called different things. They might be called an animation, I've seen animation tech artists, I've seen character riggers, character TDs. It spans all these different names, which is also confusing. Then you have rendering tech artists. So to me, that field is often misunderstood in a lot of different studios. Like rendering tech artists, essentially, like you have material graphs for setting up things like Substance, and then you have shaders, which involve things like HLSL. There's quite a few tech artists out there that do HLSL programming. And then you have the lighting element, I think, gets more and more complex every year. So you have, we talk about PBR, but there's also PBL. So you're thinking about physically based lighting. And so you're thinking about, like, how bright is this light? Because it has a particular amount of lumens, and that light will always be that way. And if you have a lighter lighting in 2 different rooms, you want them to be lighting with the same amount of light, so that way you have consistency. So you have consistency with your lights and your materials. You have environment tech artists. So more and more now you have procedural systems. You have Houdini, obviously. You have PCG and Unreal. You have geometry scripts over in Blender, and then you have even Bifrost in Maya. You have environment tools, optimization. The other things I think worth mentioning is VFX. Like, I've worked at places where VFX are listed as a tech art and places that they aren't. VFX tend to do shaders. I've seen many VFX artists use Python. They're doing simulations, and it's a very technical field. UI, to me, generally does fall pretty close to tech art. In fact, I worked at one place where I ended up helping out the UI team because we understood it enough that we just went and we did it for them. And then often tech artists work very closely with tech design because we're both building systems, and I actually think they're very closely related. I've had this question asked: what field does tech art even fall under? Or, actually, it was mentioned today. Artists, engineers, designers? I don't know. So my friend Hans Goddard put this up, and I was on LinkedIn a little while ago, and basically he's like, it's just blurring. It's just every year it just gets more and more blurry. And so we're those folks that are in that line, and we don't believe that lines need to exist, and we just keep kind of blurring it every year. I read this book last year, and it really inspired me. So there's this book called Hackers. Is actually a pretty old book, and it talks about, like, the original computers. It talks about people like Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs and all those folks, and actually talks a lot about the beginning of Sierra and early games as well. And what I really liked about it was when you look at these early programmers, they weren't taught. They were just like figuring out things as they went along. And that's what a lot of tech artists are. They basically are going, hey, I want this thing to work. I want to try to see what it does. And I'm just going to kind of figure it out. I'm going to go look on YouTube. I'm going to go hack some code together, just try to find a way to make it work. And that's what a lot of these early engineers were. They would be told they'd be going to college and say, hey, we have this computer, you need to solve this math problem, and they'd go write a video game because that's what they really wanted to do. So examples are worth a million words. I want to try to like make it clear like what I think when you look at an area that's being built, like what type of tech artist that would be. So just looking at Respawn's, like what our pipeline is, the first thing that I always think about, and often tech artists don't talk about this, is the key to a good pipeline for tech art is to start with good code practices. And I literally, like, when I joined Respawn, we had 500K lines of Python code. And we had, I don't know, 7 different libraries for Perforce. Not really libraries, because nobody was sharing. And so the first thing we did is we started saying, okay, let's think about what a code pipeline needs to look like. Most people will go into, tech artists will go learn how to do something, but they never think about the big, broader picture. So you have multiple people working on the same code base and sharing it, and what does that look like? Our tech artists, our pipeline tech artists, also what they do is they create code guidelines. So we now have rules and how we write our code, and then we go and we review them. And then initially, basically everybody, if you make code to our code base, it has to go through a review process. It sounds excessive at first, but our goal is not to write code as fast as possible to write tools. Our goal is to write code that the whole team can read and the whole team can edit. That's more important than so you want to go slow so you can go fast. Another area that our pipeline tech artists oversee is code stability. So this is an example of telemetry that we have, and we build telemetry on top of a few different third-party systems. And so we use OpenTelemetry and application insights from Microsoft Azure. We know how many users launch our tool. You make a new tool, you put it into our pipeline. We know if you're using it, we know how often you're using it, and we all know how many errors you have. This is an example showing how many exceptions we get, how many failed actions, how many Maya crashes we have during 1 week. Your customers will not tell you when a tool breaks, but your telemetry will. This is a pipeline that the tech art, sorry. This is an example of a pipeline tech artist which they set up a launcher for all of our apps. This tool is an internal tool within EA called Cadet. Cadet allows us to make it where when you launch the application, the environment will be set up the way that it should be for that user. For example, when you launch Maya, it'll set up all the environment variables so it knows where Python, all of our custom Python tools exist, and so that when you launch it, you have all your Respawn tools and it's consistent. This was hard to figure out what a GIF to show for this, but so another area that our pipeline tech artists work on is making sure that Maya is consistent between users. So what we did is we use Maya's thin client. And what the thin client allows us to do is we can install Maya on one staging machine, and then we can go upload those files to Perforce. And so that means that when the artists go sync to Perforce, everybody has the same version of Maya. Whenever Maya updates, which it's done like our current version of Maya is updated like 10 times this year, all we have to do is go run it on the staging machine, update it, submit it to Perforce. Nobody has to install Maya. All they have to do is sync and make sure every user is 100% on the same version, and it makes sure that they're not installing things. It just eliminates all kinds of human error. Our telemetry also tells us if people are ignoring this and didn't sync and are using the wrong version of Maya, because you can't trust your users. After we launch Maya, we do a lot of various customizations. So when Cadet launches Maya, it goes and it adds custom respawn tools to the menus. We add various icons throughout the interface, and so Maya is fully custom. We have our own custom layer system for display, all kinds of various things. This is an example of a tool that we call GetRig. A lot of people don't think about this, but you have an animator, they're going to try to bring in a character or a prop or a tool. We have a system that's like, we've been working on this game for 5 years. There's files everywhere. We want to make sure that our artists are finding the right files and they're loading them in the right way. So this tool makes sure that they can go grab the right character, they can grab the right weapon. When they launch it, we want to set up the scene. So the next thing we do is we go, hey, what are you doing? You're going to load in this character. What do you want to do? So you want to put this character in the lobby. You want to put this character in what we call, we have these things that are called like a glad card. Well, when you click that, it'll say, okay, I'm going to set up the scene and make sure you have all the pieces that you need so that way your scene is set up correctly. That way, when you go to export, it's all set up for you. Once the user picks these choices, it references in that rig and sets everything up. It's worth mentioning, just this element alone this is like what an animation tech artist would be working on. We have all kinds of tools to set these rigs up, automatically build controls. We do not build this by hand. We build our rigs all through code. We have tools to automate it so that way we can do things quickly and consistently. Another example, it's a small example but a very important one, is we automate setting up a thing called our project for Maya. And what this effectively does is when you go bring in a file, it has a path, and it says this is where my rig is. And so you want to make sure that that path is going to be updated if you need to move your files. So the project says this is where we are currently putting our files, but if somebody wants to go move all your source files to a new location, you want to be able to change that project so it can move. This is very important, like if you're using source control and you have giant projects and you need to all suddenly move everything to a new location and you don't want to break everything. This is an example of a third-party tool that we actually recently integrated because we were kind of looking at it. Do we want to write this? Because this is a pretty complex Qt interface with custom painting. So what we ended up doing is we used a third-party tool called Dream Picker. The reason why we have a tool like this is once you have multiple characters in a scene or you have a lot of overlapping controls, it becomes very hard to pick them. And so what this does is it just allows the animators very quick access. They can go grab the controls they need to, key them, and what have you. This is another example of a third-party tool that we also recently integrated. This tool is called Studio Library. It allows us to create a database of all of our animations. The animation team needs to be able to share animations between different users. This goes up into Perforce. Then they can quickly export an animation, search for them, share animations, share poses, set like common poses for hands or faces or what have you. This is another area of the pipeline that can get really tricky, especially when you have lots of different tools. So we currently have 7 different render viewports that the artists work within. The shader material tech artists have to construct pipelines that allow for our artists to view these assets correctly in each different area. We attempt to keep them as close as possible to our final in-game renderer. It's very difficult because every single viewport is different. So we have Substance, Maya, Marmoset. They're not the same. There's different lighting conditions. There's different ways each of the viewports handle things. There's ways to solve this in the future that are kind of, a lot of people are putting their minds into thinking about things like using a new way of using shaders, which is Material X, where you can make a common thing that's shared between all of them. Back in Maya, this is our material manager. So this tool is programmed by one of our animation and also a pipeline tech artist. It gives us a way to view all of our game shaders in our Maya scene. So these are only the shaders that are for game. It ignores anything that's just like a Maya one. We utilize the Maya Uber shader for these materials. This is owned by the shader tech artists and also the rendering team. This allows us, so when we're using this, this Uber shader, it's basically integrated throughout Maya. It's actually written by Autodesk. I don't know, I just put up some code for the heck of it. It's about like 2,800 lines of code. But like basically we've gone and we augmented it and added different features so that way it can mimic what we're doing on our side. This is an example of one of our in-game post-process shaders. So this happens when you teleport with our character Alter. On Apex, a post-process shader like this is written in HLSL. So a specific post-process here was implemented by one of our shader tech artists. Here's another example of a tool created by a pipeline tech artist. So this tool is a standalone application. What it does is it basically allows us to create new characters, skins, and other game assets. And what it does is it automates the setup of our game data requirements. It's gotten so automated that basically a producer can go into ShotGrid, or whatever it's called, because Autodesk keeps renaming it. You go and you put a name in for an asset. This tool picks it up and it will go create all the things needed for the asset to exist. And then all the artist needs to do is go set up the asset, but all of the hooks for scripts and paths and everything is all set up for them. It'll also generate renders of all of our assets that we use inside of menus. And then it also maintains a very strict naming convention to make sure all of our files are consistent. Another area that TechArt creates tools for is the environment team. This is an example of a specialty tool that we built in Houdini. It basically is a way to, how do we describe it? It's like we call it a platform tool, but it basically allows the artist to create a bunch of automated settings for edges and automatically map UVs and then slap a bunch of different textures on there to make that. So another area that TechArt gets involved in is anytime our engineers are putting in new features, we basically try to pull all the pieces together between engineering and art. So this is an example of our landscape tool. It was set up both in our engine and in our level editor, but there are a lot of elements that the artists need to do to interact with it. The foundation of our landscape tool is fairly simple, like many others. It's based on a height map. It can be edited in many different ways. In this example, we exported a Houdini height map, but this was kind of a pretty early test. We also had a technical environment artist working very closely with our engineers as they developed a lot of different systems within our editor itself. So among those systems were these splines. So we have these concept of splines that you can lay down, and those splines will basically edit the height map, and then you can also layer them so that they can be additive and subtractive. This example demonstrates how we tile a decal along a spline. The spline's easy to manipulate, and it also affects the height map along with it. The goals of tools like these are ultimately to make it for fast iteration for both the artists, but also for the designers. And this allows them to change their minds quickly without hurting anything in production. So what's next for our pipeline? Things that our team are thinking about is more data-driven creation. So things like USD, data blurring the lines between each of our applications. Common materials like Material X shared between all of our rendering viewports so that we have consistency. and making more consistent APIs between all of our products, all of our applications, so that way any application, when it needs to, can take that driver's seat and basically go make sure the other application's doing what it needs to do. Here's some things that we've been kind of playing around with. This is actually a glimpse into some tests of doing procedural work with Bifrost in Maya. We're doing things like being able to project assets onto the surface of our landscape, playing around with adding randomization to our grass and fitting it within like our splines. And here's some examples of, we're like, well, what if designers want to be able to cut out an area that we're procedurally putting content in and cutting it out? So these are just like some early things that we're looking at getting into our engine. Yeah, and this is all set up in Bifrost and Maya, which I'm a huge fan of Bifrost. So that's basically all of my talk. So do you have any questions? They're getting a... So we have somebody over here.
Hello. Thank you for the exciting talk. It was very enlightening. It's very rare to see tech art, specifically like just because when everyone is talking about either programming or game art, me specifically am a Blender add-on developer and I work in pipelines. I have made some tools that many studios around the world use, and I am still in college and I would really like some advice on how to progress in your career as a tech artist, because that's usually not something people talk about. There are not a lot of people, that's why.
So the question is how to progress further in the career of tech art?
Yeah, yeah.
On like the pipeline side? Specifically?
On the pipeline and 3D art side as well.
Okay, so on the pipeline side, like I really think the key is just to remain curious and keep trying to build more things. So like today, Python is the de facto language. If you like are using Python, you can talk to Motion Builder, Maya, Houdini, Unreal, whole gamut. Python is the language. I mentioned I also write I wrote like a Python book for Maya a while back, and the reason I did it is because I was like, this is where at the time it wasn't like as the de facto thing, but like it is what you want to be digging into. Also Qt is really good. Not every pipeline is going to be the same though. Like Unreal is not Qt, but Maya is. Our engine actually uses for our level editor, it's using IMGUI. I think some others do too, and so you kind of have to adapt. Like today, you don't maybe know where you're going to be, and so what you can do is you just need to keep getting studying how you can get better at programming. Just keep writing more tools, keep solving problems, and also there's always like if you're like not understanding something, there's always a massive amount of people online through YouTube and stuff these days that you can find. So, but the problems are always going to change. Even if you're at one studio, the problems are going to change. They never remain the same. So it's just constantly being in the mindset of learning.
Hey Ryan, I'm also a technical artist. I have seen like you have a good example of the AAA games and 3D games, but there are some studios which have one technical artist which is generalist technical artist. It's not a specific pipeline technical artist. As a technical artist, I'm doing all the things. Like animation technical artist, I'm a shader developer, and I am also pipeline shader. So on a mobile platform, when people are targeting mobile platform, can you suggest something where we can found as a technical artist to do automation, or we can contribute more on a specifically for mobile platform? Like if this game is from mobile platform.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get the question.
So, for example, if there is a small studio, there are only some tech arts are there, okay, which is generalized tech art. That is so because there's not much requirement on every pipeline tech artist or a shader tech artist. There won't be specific or a expert for that pipeline. And there's a target is a mobile device or mobile games are there. So where we see limited opportunity as a tech art to do more things. Over there, can you suggest us something where we can do automation, which is the platform, which is help us to grow more on a tech art side on a mobile platform?
Could you sum that for me? It's very echoey.
Essentially, he's asking, what opportunities there could be on a mobile platform. If you're targeting mobile, what are the
With
tech art department? Yeah, what could be
Opportunities for tech
for an
art within
artist
mobile?
in the project? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it really, like, what's tricky with tech art and like building all these systems is like there's always things that we need to solve. And so I've heard people even say like, oh, well, Unreal like has written all these pipelines, so you don't need a pipeline. But Unreal also has Python and all these different systems that they've built to make it so that you can automate stuff because you always need to automate something. So, but what's hard is each game is so different. You could be making a game that is focused on, it could be drawings, like I've seen some 2D games coming out, but you still might need to automate getting all those drawings into a sequence so you can get it to your game. And you could have a tech artist go do that. You don't need to have I guess your standard engineer do that. But often tech artists are also going to be at the front end trying to figure out, okay, making sure that all of your source assets are set up correctly. Like a good example even is like, well, you're working in Maya. What do you export as? Do you export as FBX, OBJ, USD, and why? Like for us, we were looking at all of our Maya files recently. If we change it over into USD, we can save ourselves 50 gigs on just on a portion of our pipeline of source data, so that way our team doesn't have to download that from Perforce. And it's just because of how all the data is organized. But that's specifically to us. It may not be as valuable to another team in that particular instance. So the tech artist kind of is always going to be looking at, and again, I'm trying to break down different things. It's like a pipeline tech artist is often going to be looking at your pipeline and how you can make all these optimizations. So it doesn't matter if you're on mobile. It doesn't matter if you're on, like, if you have a big game or a small game. But your problems are always going to be different. It's like you'd never know what that problem is going to be.
Hello. Hey, so I'm part of a small game studio that's hoping to hire its first bunch of tech artists. So do you have any recommendations or suggestions on how do we go about finding good tech artists? What kind of interview questions do we ask them to validate their skills?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing very well.
Okay.
He's saying he's looking for tech artists, and what would you look for in a good tech artist? How do you pick a good tech artist?
How do you pick a good one?
Yeah.
Well, that's the $1 million question. So how do you pick a good tech artist? Well, it's always great to have one on staff so he can help you with picking out the next one. But if you don't have one at all, well, you got to kind of start somewhere. So from my perspective, a good tech artist is going to be a bit engineer and a bit artist. Like, you want somebody that has definitely the Python experience where they can be going to write things, but they need to be able to actually, like for example, like Maya, when you go do something in Maya, it'll actually write out code. It'll just it'll just print code to the script editor, and you can go kind of copy that. But that's not enough. You need to be able to understand like actually how to write code, because you need to be able to write out a system so that you can get things done that you need to get done. And I know this is very broad, but it's like you need somebody that can present to you problems that they've had in front of them, and how they've solved it. That's probably the best way to put it. So you go, show me a problem that you had. How did you solve it? Why did you solve it that way? How much faster did it make the artists? How much time did you save? And that's like a big part of it. If you're looking at somebody that's like, say they're working on the rigging side and setting up characters, you want somebody that is looking at not just doing everything by hand. You want them to be looking at like, well, I was given 50 characters and I needed to like get these all set up, and it's like, well, how did you automate it? How did you speed yourself up? You didn't do every single one by hand, did you? Because sure, you can do that, but that's a lot of time and it's not necessary. And it's also prone to human error. If you do everything by hand, you might do something 10 different ways and not even realize it by the time you've done it. What's that?
We have time for one question.
One more? I think there's one back here.
Hi, so you were saying how the lines between art, design, and engineering has been blurred. So would you say that a tech artist is the bridge between an artist, an engineer, and a designer, or someone who plays all of those three roles?
So I was actually thinking about that. Like, I think, I don't know what to call it, but I don't even think tech artist is a good name for it the more I think about it in some ways, because you have tech designers and you have tech artists, but they're actually very similar. Tech designers are typically solving designer problems in the very same way that tech artists are doing. However, it tends to be that the designers are more closely on the engineering side, because they often are, a lot of the designers aren't working on Maya, they're more working on maybe the level editor side. But they're both very similar roles. So to me, tech art tends to be in between the engineering and the art and the design, and then these tech designers tend to be on those other lines, blurring the way. But like, I've been at places where the designers are, we had a few designers that were out taking classes on programming, because they're like, well, I'm doing this so often, I need to understand it better. And that's totally the right thing. Like tech design is a legit field that is growing, and you have designers that, like, we have many designers at Respawn that are scripting and writing code all the time. So it's a very normal thing. Unreal, same thing. Like, they have a newish thing called Verse, and that's the type of thing designers would be working with. They'd be scripting.
Awesome. I think Ryan will be here for any offline conversations.
Yep.
We'll wrap up. Thank you, guys.